Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for taking the time to be here. I'd like to start with a simple thought. If I asked 10 people what makes a great healthcare organization, I probably hear the same kinds of answers: compassion, expertise, accessibility, trust. And you know what? I'd agree with every single one of them. But here's the reality: none of those qualities create value if the people who need them never discover the organization in the first place. That's really what this proposal is about. Today, I'm presenting an integrated advertising strategy for Legacy Behavioral Health Center that's designed to strengthen community awareness, reinforce the organization's position in the market, and ultimately connect more people with the services they need. Throughout the presentation, I'll walk through the current landscape, the challenges and opportunities that I identified, the strategy itself, and how we can evaluate whether that strategy is actually working. So, with that, let's start with the organization we're trying to support. Legacy Behavioral Health Center already has something that many organizations spend years trying to build, and that's a strong mission. The organization exists to provide accessible, compassionate, evidence-based behavioral health care, and it offers a wide range of services from outpatient therapy and psychiatry to targeted case management and community-based support. Now, the reason I mention that is because this proposal isn't about changing Legacy for what it is, but it's about making sure more people understand what Legacy already does well. Sometimes organizations assume that because they provide excellent services, the community will automatically know about them, and that's unfortunately rarely how it works. Healthcare is competitive, attention spans are short, and people have more choices than ever before. That means even great organizations have to intentionally communicate their value, and that's exactly what the strategy is designed to accomplish. So let's take a step back and look at the environment Legacy is operating in today. Behavioral healthcare has changed significantly over the last several years. Demand continues to increase, competition continues to grow, and perhaps most importantly, the way people look for care has changed. Most people don't begin with a phone call anymore. They begin with a Google search or a recommendation or something they saw on social media like Instagram or Snapchat or Facebook, or maybe a physician referral. The point is, those first impressions often happen long before any walks through the front door. That's why visibility matters. Because if potential patients never encounter Legacy during that decision making process, they can't choose Legacy, regardless of how exceptional the care may be. Understanding that shift really sets the stage for everything else in this proposal. So, where are the biggest opportunities? After looking at the organization and the current marketplace, a few stood out immediately. The first is increasing public awareness. People can't utilize services they don't know exist. The second is competitive landscape. Behavioral healthcare isn't lacking quality providers, it's filled with them, which means organizations have to clearly communicate why they're different. Another major opportunity involves referral relationships. So, physicians, schools, employers, and community organizations all play an important role in connecting people with behavioral healthcare. Strengthening those relationships doesn't just improve referrals, it expands trust throughout the community. And finally, there's marketing efficiency. Advertising should never be about spending more money, it should be about making smarter decisions with the resources you already have. That's really the philosophy behind this entire proposal. It's not about doing more advertising, it's about doing better advertising. Now, here's where things start getting rather interesting. One of the biggest mistakes organizations make is trying to speak to everyone. And you know what the problem is with that? When your message is designed for everyone, it usually doesn't resonate with anyone in particular. It's kind of like trying to order everything on the menu, right? You end up with a lot, but none of it's really the right choice. That's exactly why market segmentation is so important. Instead of treating the entire community as one audience, this proposal separates audiences based on their needs and the way they interact with the organization. Our primary audiences are the individuals and families most likely to seek behavioral healthcare services directly. Our secondary audiences are equally important because they're often the people influencing those decisions, like physicians, schools, employers, and community organizations. Each of those groups have different motivations, different questions, different concerns, and because of that, they deserve different messaging. When organizations recognize those differences, advertising becomes far more effective, not because they're spending more, but because they're communicating more intentionally. And once we've identified exactly who we're trying to reach, the next question becomes, how do we want them to remember Legacy? That's where brand identity now comes in. So now that we've identified who we're trying to reach, the next question is just as important. How do we want those audiences to remember Legacy? That's really what brand identity is all about. It's not the logo, it's not the colors. It's the feeling people associate with the organization after every interaction. For legacy, that identity should consistently communicate three things: accessibility, compassion, and community-focused care. Those ideas are then reinforced by the brand attributes on this slide, like trust, clinical excellence, collaboration, and whole person care. The important thing here is consistency, ladies and gentlemen. Whether someone finds legacy through Google, a physician referral, or community event, the message should feel the same because over time, consistency builds credibility. And credibility builds what? It builds trust. Now, here's something every organization has to answer. Why should someone choose us instead of someone else? The classic. That's competitive positioning. The goal isn't to convince people that competitors provide poor care. The goal is to clearly communicate what makes legacy different. In this proposal, those differentiators are rather clear. Comprehensive behavioral health services, a coordinated care model, experienced multidisciplinary providers, some of them being bilingual or trilingual, strong community partnerships. Those aren't just operational strengths, they're marketing strengths. They're the reasons people remember an organization, and they're the reasons advertising should consistently reinforce those messages instead of just trying to reinvent them. So this is really the heart of the proposal. Everything we've talked about up until this point has been building towards this slide. One thing I wanted to avoid was recommending a single advertising channel and calling it a strategy. That's rarely enough. Instead, this proposal recommends an integrated approach where each communication channel supports the others. Digital advertising increases visibility. Referral outreach strengthens professional relationships. Community partnerships reinforce trust. Educational content positions legacy as a knowledgeable resource rather than simply another provider advertising services. And reputation management helps ensure positive patient experiences continue working long after the first interaction. Think about it for a second. A potential patient might first discover legacy through a Google search. Later, they may see an educational content on social media, then receive a recommendation from their physician. None of those touch points work in isolation. Together, they create confidence, and that's exactly what effective advertising should do. Once the strategy is established, the next step is deciding where those messages should actually appear. Each communication channel serves a different purpose. Google search advertising reaches people who are actively looking for behavioral health care. Social media keeps legacy visible within the community generally. Community events create opportunities to build relationships face to face. Referral campaigns strengthen partnerships with healthcare providers and other organizations. Email marketing helps maintain those professional relationships over time. And finally, website optimization ensures that once someone finds legacy, the experience encourages them to take the next step. Now, I know marketing people love to argue which platform is quote unquote the best. And honestly, the best platform is usually the one that reaches the right audience at the right time. That's why this proposal recommends using them together instead of relying too heavily on any single one. Even the best strategy won't accomplish very much without a plan for execution. That's why implementation is organized into 5 seamless phases. It starts with research and planning, because it's much easier to build a successful campaign when the objectives are clear from the beginning. Next comes creative development, where the messaging and advertising materials are produced. Then the campaign launches across the selected communication channels. From there, performance is monitored continuously. And finally, the campaign is refined over time based on real results rather than assumptions. One thing I really liked about this approach is that it treats advertising as an ongoing process and not a one-time event. Communities change, markets change. Good advertising changes with them. And once the campaign is in motion, the next question becomes, how do we know it's actually working? That's exactly what we'll look at next. A strategy is only valuable, ladies and gentlemen, if you can actually measure whether it's working. That's why I wanted to include specific performance metrics rather than simply saying the campaign should, quote unquote, increase awareness. Awareness is important, but leadership needs something more concrete than that. Metrics like website traffic, referral volume, qualified leads, and appointment conversion rates help show whether advertising is reaching the right people. Patient acquisition cost tells us whether those marketing dollars are being spent efficiently. Retention and community engagement help us understand whether those relationships continue beyond the initial appointment. The goal isn't to chase one impressive number. It's to look at the overall picture and continuously improve based on what the data is telling us. Because at the end of the day, good advertising isn't about getting attention, it's about getting results. Now, I know everyone's favorite slide is usually the ROI slide, the infamous ROI slide, especially if you're the one approving the budget. Fortunately, advertising is one of those areas where success can actually be measured. The figures shown here are intentionally illustrated because I didn't have access to Legacy's proprietary financial information. So rather than guessing actual numbers, I thought it was more appropriate to demonstrate the process, because that's really the important part here. The organization establishes an investment, measures the impact, compares that impact against campaign costs, and then uses those results to make smarter decisions moving forward. Whether the final ROI ends up being higher or lower isn't really the point. The point is creating a repeatable system for evaluating advertising based on evidence instead of assumptions. That's how organizations continue improving over time. So, after everything we've discussed today, what does this proposal really accomplish? For me, it comes down to one idea. It helps more people find the care they need. Yes, it strengthens brand awareness. Yes, it improves marketing efficiency. Yes, it supports referral relationships and organizational growth. Those are all important. But those outcomes exist because the organization becomes more visible to the people who can genuinely benefit from its services. And I think that's an important distinction. Advertising shouldn't exist simply to promote an organization. When it's done well, it connects people with solutions they may not have found otherwise. That's the value this proposal is ultimately trying to create. So, I'd like to leave you with one final thought. This proposal doesn't recommend reinventing Legacy Behavioral Health Center. Honestly, that would probably be outside of the scope of this assignment, anyways. What it does recommend is something much more practical. Take an organization that's already providing valuable services, communicate those strengths more intentionally, measure the results, and continue improving over time. That's really the foundation of advertising account management. It's not about just creating one great ad. It's about building a strategy that consistently supports the organization's goals long after the campaign launches. Thank you for taking the time to review this proposal with me. I sincerely appreciate your time and attention, and I hope this presentation demonstrated how advertising account management principles can be applied to create meaningful value for both the organization and the communities it serves. Thank you.